Caregivers are asking, should I be power of attorney for my grandmother? It's good that this question is being asked because truly the implications of this choice can be life-affecting and long-term. Stay with me while I share the pros and the cons for considering being a power of attorney for a grandmother or grandfather so that you can make an informed decision. I'll also share some questions that may help you gain a little clarity about the responsibility of being a power of attorney agent for a loved one. And if you decide that you do want to accept this role, I'll share tips about topics that you want to bring up with your grandma or grandpa and come to some kind of an agreement about before you accept this role. So those tips are going to be at the end, so stay with me all the way to the end of this video. If this is your first time on my channel, I'm Pamela D Wilson, a caregiving expert, advocate, and speaker who helps adults and their caregivers work through health, financial, legal aspects of caregiving, including navigating family relationships and discussions. You can learn more about me and my professional experience in caregiving by looking at the links below this video. You'll find my bio, a link to schedule a one-on-one consultation, online courses, and more. Please do like this video, follow my channel, share these and other videos here, and comment, even if it's only to say thank you. One little thank you helps this video find more people throughout the world. Young adults who have a good relationship with grandparents, aunts, uncles, often consider taking on a more extensive role as their caregiver when these family members get older. When I was in my teens and my early 20s, I had a wonderful, amazing grandmother who I visited frequently, and I was not her caregiver because my mother and my mother's step-siblings took the primary responsibility of caring for Grandma. I just visited, and sometimes I did some errands for her. I also had a wonderful aunt and uncle who got older and started to need care. And they lived in California, and I used to go visit them all the time. Every summer I would go spend time with them. And they had an extra bedroom in their house. So for a little bit of time, I actually considered moving from Nebraska, where I was born, all the way across the country to live with them in California and care for them. Now, I decided against this because at the time I just had gotten a new job, I was starting college, I was starting out with my life, and it would have been very disruptive. Now, additionally, I'll mention that my aunt and uncle had siblings in California who were able to visit and help out. So in retrospect, even though I loved my aunt and my uncle dearly, I did make the right decision to stay put where I was, work, and attend college in the evenings. My life would have been so significantly altered if I uprooted myself from Nebraska to California, and I had to start all over, figuring out where I was going to go to school and get a job and all of that. So while I understand the emotions involved in wanting to do a good thing for a grandma, a grandpa, aunt, uncle, other family member, when you're young, the effects of these choices can be lifelong and long-lasting. And it's hard to understand that when you're young because you kind of don't know what happens later in life, right? So here's a couple of questions to ask if you find yourself in this position where grandma and grandpa are saying, hey, why don't you move in? You can take care of me. It'll be a great situation. Or somebody else in your family is saying this. So if it's your grandparents, why aren't your mom and dad taking on the responsibility to care for their parent who is your grandma or grandpa? That would be the first generation helping the next generation. Secondly, is there an aunt and an uncle who would be a brother or a sister of your parents available to help grandma and grandpa? And if your aunt and your uncle did not have children, who else might be available. So kind of look at your parents are here, your grandparents are here. So who's below your parents? Everybody below your parents should be the next generation helping your parents. It shouldn't like skip from your grandparents to your parents to you, right? Although it does happen sometimes. And so while these caregiving responsibilities are often passed down from one generation to a next, in my opinion, they should not skip a generation. This means that parents and their children would be the obvious people to enter into a caregiving relationship, just as you are the children of your parents. Your parents may have expectations about you being their caregivers. So it's important to take a look at all these family relationships and how they're working or not working, because I can tell you that life does take a lot of twists and turns when loved ones get sick and care responsibilities arise. So before you just jump in as a young adult and accept that caregiving role, look around and say, who else in the family is the more logical person to take on this responsibility before I do? Because I'm young, I'm in my 20s and 30s. I need to establish my career. Maybe I want to get married. Maybe I want to finish school. People who are older than you have already done that. They're already probably better established and have more life experience. Now, it's also important to understand what being a power of attorney agent for grandma or grandpa means. What kind of responsibility is that? And if you've never done it, it's hard to imagine what does that mean. Being a power of attorney agent is a lot more responsibility than just helping out. It's a lot more responsibility than just being a caregiver. So let's take a step back and look at how being a caregiver might affect your life, and then I'll talk a little more about power of attorney agent responsibilities. So first, you want to look at the decision to be a caregiver and how that affects your life. How old are you? Have you finished school or college, if this was on your list to do? Are you living independently? Are you working? Are you financially supporting yourself? Are you dating or considering getting married or having a family or kids? Do you have career goals that you want to achieve in the next 3, 5, 10 years? So understand that helping out a loved one, being a caregiver, can start with only a little bit of time. Maybe going over on the weekends or picking up prescriptions or maybe some groceries, or the cat or the dog needs to go to the vet. But when you are supporting yourself, when you're working, maybe you're also going to school, this little amount of time can really affect your life. And I'll share an example. So when I was younger, I was working full time and I was going to college at night. And so I would get off at 5 o'clock and I'd go to school, and I'd be to school from like 6 to 9 o'clock. And I did that like 3 nights a week, which left the other 2 nights a week and the weekend to get my homework done and everything else I needed to do, because I had my own place, right? I had to clean and get my laundry done and, do like life errands. Well, my uncle wanted me to come visit every week, and he didn't understand why I couldn't do that. And I don't really think he understood what, working and going to school and being female and self-supporting yourself, what all of that meant, because he was from a different generation. He was in his 80s by that time, and I was in my early 20s, right? And I'd say, oh, Uncle, it's like I have to schedule my time down to the hour. I know what I'm doing every single hour of the day so that I can get my homework done and work and do all these other things. So consider what your life is like and what you want to get done, and then what this care responsibility is as far as like time and duties. Because this means that if you agree to be a caregiver, you may have to delay your dreams or goals. And not just for a week or a month or 2 months. This can go on a year, 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, until the person that you care for passes away. The time frames in caregiving and the parts of life that have to be traded result in this imbalance, right? You're giving more time to caregiving over here, which means that you have less time over here for yourself and your job and relationships and things that are important to you. So now let's look at power of attorney, being a power of attorney agent. Now, I have an extensive program on my website about power of attorney. The link will be below here. There's also a lot of videos here on my YouTube channel because you want more information than only what is in this video. It's a serious, long-term responsibility. So before you make that decision, make time to go on my website, watch more videos. Being a power of attorney agent is a legal responsibility. Once your name is on that piece of paper and you accept the responsibility, unless there's a person named as a backup or as an alternate who will agree to take over this job, and it is a job, if you can't continue to do it or you change your mind and you think, oh, I should have never done that, then you pass it on to somebody else. But if there's no second name on there, then you have to find somebody else to replace yourself, which may not be easy because it's a lot of work and it takes a lot of skills. It takes the ability to manage money and bank accounts and maybe your loved one's property and their home. You might find yourself paying bills for grandma or grandpa or running errands and paying for things. You might find yourself having to look at grandma and grandpa's monthly income and make a budget and figure out how you're going to pay the bills and decide, well, do I buy more groceries this month or do I pay the electricity or is the homeowner's insurance due? You know, what do we have to pay for? And then, what if grandma or grandpa doesn't have enough income or savings to pay the bills or medical care? What will you do then? Are you going to figure out a way for them to get other help? Are you going to start paying their bills? I mean, this legal responsibility is not a decision that you want to make in a snap or overnight. Because once you get into this role, I can tell you, you're going to feel more emotionally attached. You're going to feel more obligated to do more things for grandma and grandpa. And if you start saying no, then you're probably going to feel guilty. So the question is, do you want to be placed in this very serious role while you're trying to build your own life and save for your own retirement and get married and all of this? As good as maybe moving into grandma or grandpa's home might sound because you're not going to pay rent, there are trade-offs here. Living with grandma and grandpa can become restrictive on your life. Some caregivers tell me they feel like they're living in a prison because you rely on your grandparents for a place to live. Maybe you change from a full-time job to a part-time job. Maybe you give up your job because your grandparents can't afford to pay for caregivers. And you think, well, I'll just be the full-time caregiver. Maybe then one or both of them have memory loss or dementia and they can't be left alone. So now you're in a position where you have zero income. You're relying on grandma and grandma's house for a place to live. You're relying on their income to pay for everything. And so by making these two choices, and it is a choice, right? You agreed to do it. You didn't have to agree to do it. You have greatly limited your ability to do what you wanted to do in life before you became grandma and grandpa's caregivers. More than likely, you've given up your friends and social activities because you can't leave grandma and grandpa, or you have no money to go to a movie or go for coffee or meet friends. So you had this life before grandma and grandpa with a lot of things going on, a lot of possibilities, a lot of hopes and dreams. And you basically traded that life of possibilities for a life of restriction, sometimes feeling pretty isolated, sometimes feeling lonely because the only people you spend time with, as much as you love them, are grandma and grandpa. You don't get to go out and do things that your friends are doing, and you lose touch with your friends, and you see everybody else out there living your life, and maybe you feel resentful. Now, even if, let's say your grandparents are wealthy and they've got a lot of money, why then would you become their caregiver? Why would grandma and grandpa not use their money to pay for outside care? So that could be something that you could help grandma and grandpa work through and say, Grandma, you guys have money to pay for care. Let me help you find a caregiver to come into the home. Then you would not need to be that caregiver. You could still be the grandchild, but they still may want you to be the power of attorney. If you take on that role, then you are supervising the care and finding the caregivers and finding people to come in and take care of them. So in this decision about power of attorney, you got two roles here. One is you could be the caregiver and you could be the power of attorney, or you could not be the caregiver and you could be the power of attorney. Again, that depends on how financially stable your grandparents are and if they are willing to pay for care. Now, we got the money side, right? But then there's the medical side. This is the way more emotional side, right? Because grandma and grandpa are sick and you're worried about something happening to them. And what if they have to go into the hospital or a nursing home? And what if grandma and grandpa dies? As a young person, confronting death is very, very emotional. So if you're going to take over the role of medical power of attorney, the question you want to ask yourself is, are you up to? Do you have the time to learn about their health diagnosis, attend doctor appointments with them, learn why they take medications, pick up their medications, organize their medications? Now, some of this can be a little easier if grandma or grandpa have been very proactive about their health and they're organized and all of that. But if they haven't been good about seeing doctors, if your grandma or grandpa is like, oh, I don't need to go to the doctor, doctors only tell you that you're sick, right? then you might have a little battle trying to get them to go see a doctor or take medications or participate in medical care. Are you up for that battle if they disagree? Because I can tell you, many older adults, and rightly so, we all want to do this, want to make their own choices and their own decisions. But the problem is when you become involved as their caregiver or as the power of attorney agent, then their choices affect you. So it's important to understand that your grandparents can make bad decisions or crazy decisions, right? And then you can be negatively affected by these choices. So how are you going to navigate these discussions with grandma or grandpa? They refuse to go to the doctor. They don't want to take medications. So every Sunday they're at the hospital emergency room and you have to be there. Your grandparents' resistance to do things will affect your life. Are you okay with that? Or will you be frustrated or angry or resentful? Accepting responsibility to be a caregiver for another person or be a power of attorney for another person is a very serious responsibility. It's not one to be taken lightly. Most caregivers don't think about the long-term effects of caregiving, and they do find themselves exhausted or worn out or angry or resentful 2, 3, 5 years down the road. They're angry that their siblings aren't helping out, that nobody else is stepping up. Well, they accepted the responsibility. So if you thought about this and you don't want to be a caregiver and you don't want to be a power of attorney agent for grandma and grandpa, how do you politely say no? And if you want to accept one or both roles, caregiver or power of attorney, what guidelines or conversations or boundaries should you put in place to make sure that this doesn't take over your life? Let's start with saying no in a nice way. So before you say no, make sure you take time to think about it, investigate options for your parents to take care of their parent or somebody else in the family, your aunts or uncles. See if there's anybody else that can possibly do this. If there's no, then you have to decide whether you want to be this person. Now, maybe you were raised by your grandparents. Maybe your parents were not good parents. A lot of times, this is how grandchildren become caregivers or powers of attorney for grandparents, because the parents just were absent. So let's say there's no other option. Nobody else. Aunts, uncles, cousins, nobody else. No other grandchildren, no other people at your level who are willing to do this. Exhaust all options within your family. And then sit down with grandma and grandpa to discuss their expectations. How much time do they expect you to be in this caregiver role? What do they expect you to do? Do they have money to pay for outside care? Now, these discussions can be difficult because maybe grandma and grandpa are wondering like, well, why are you asking me all this? Well, if you're going to accept the role of a caregiver or a power of attorney, you have a right to know. So while these conversations may sound intimidating, if you don't have the discussion with them, you don't have enough information to know if you can be that caregiver or that power of attorney or what you are getting yourself into. The more that they resist talking about it, that is a red flag. You're going to have a lot of problems if they don't even want to talk about it. Now, if they want to talk about it and they're, saying, how can we work this out, maybe a little easier. But you got to have the money conversation and you got to have that care conversation. Like how much money do you have? What are your medical conditions? Do you believe in going to the doctor? Are you proactive? You want to know if they have a plan and what that plan is, because you don't want to be their entire plan. If you are, you're going to give up your life. You're going to give up your dreams. You're going to give up your hopes. So if grandma and grandpa have money, then you can say, well, why don't we hire an outside caregiver? I may agree to be your agent and help you do these things, but I don't want to be the person who provides care. You also want to make sure that you have somebody to talk to, a caregiving expert, a power of attorney, protector, or advisor. There's links below this video who can help you work through these things that you have no idea what's going to happen, right? You need advice, and you need to make sure that grandma and grandpa are going to allow you to pay for that advice out of their money. This is important. Having expert advice is so, so important. And so the bottom line is, if you don't feel comfortable having these conversations or you're not sure what to ask, then talk to your grandparents and have that conversation and say, I'm young, there's a lot I don't know, probably some things that you don't know, grandma and grandpa. Can we talk to a caregiving expert? Can we schedule a consultation with somebody to see what we should be looking at before I agree to become your caregiver, before I agree to become your power of attorney agent? Because there may be some things you're not even thinking about, right? So in this situation, then, if you have the consultation, if you talk to me or somebody else and you still decide you're going to do it, then you got to agree, separate of this power of attorney document, what this looks like. Can I pay for caregivers out of your money? Can I pay for ongoing consultations with a caregiving expert? Do we need a CPA? Do we need a financial planner? Do we need to get other documents done? I want to make sure that there's resources so I can do this for you, and so I'm not worried about having to pay for this for you. Because a lot of children, a lot of grandchildren do get in the role where they're having to pay grandma and grandpa's rent and they're buying groceries and all this, and it just totally changes their life. So being a power of attorney agent for grandma or grandpa or their caregiver, big responsibility, long-term life-affecting consequences. Make sure that you fully understand what you are getting into before you say yes. And if it's already gone past that, if you said yes, then you have to find a way to work your way out of this. If you are in that situation where you've given up your job and you're living with them and you have no life. So, bottom line, if you need more assistance in having these conversations and making decisions, scroll down below. There is a link to have a one-to-one consultation with me. I thank you all so much for being here. I'm Pamela D Wilson. I'm a caregiving expert, advocate, and speaker who helps caregivers and older adults manage through medical, healthcare, financial, legal, family discussions, everything from A to Z of caregiving. I'll see you all again soon in another video.